I think if we're live, maybe drop something in the chat to let us know that we are in fact live. This is our first time doing a live post game show. We had to hop on here. This is essential that Hot Hand Theory weigh in on this game that we just saw from the Knicks and the Celtics. The Knicks go down at Madison Square Garden 131 to 104 to the Boston Celtics. There is so much to talk about. Geoff, both you and I were kind of live tweeting throughout the game, things that we're noticing, things that we were seeing, things that we were thinking about ahead of time with this game that were kind of coming to fruition. Uh, we see different people's perspectives floating around social media about the causes of this destruction, I have to say, from the Boston Celtics, the second one of the season, to be honest. And we just thought we had to come on here and just weigh in and give our perspective on what's going on and what we think are some of the primary causes for what we're seeing with the Knicks just struggling to do anything with the Boston Celtics, especially in this scenario without OG and Anunoby. Geoff, where should we start? We gotta break it down. Also, by the way, if you're as people are filtering in, we're gonna have this be highly interactive. So leave your thoughts in the chat. Your frustrations, your excitement, things that you want to see changed. We want your perspective and your opinion, and we will, definitely be interacting with all you guys who are here throughout the show. So thank you for joining us, and yeah, so much to break down. Geoff, what are your thoughts? What are your initial thoughts after that game?
Um, my thoughts are that that was just another what's becoming for the Knicks complete tactical beatdown. We saw it opening night against the Celtics. Missoula he just came in prepared, and there was a little bit of a, oh well, the Knicks, this is a new team, and they're getting, they're infusing new pieces. This is going to take time. It's a totally reasonable perspective, but I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, actually, but at the time, our concern wasn't necessarily the players not having chemistry that they should have, but it was the concern about the tactical disadvantage the Knicks seemed to be at, and the strategic disadvantage in terms of you had one team who was on both ends hunting the right areas to try to create or prevent the right shots. The Celtics were attacking what they needed to attack offensively so that they could create a slew of open threes or get to the rim. And defensively, they were helping off of the right people to prevent the Knicks from taking those types of shots. So you look at this game, and people will say, well, what stands out? And it's like, oh, well, the Celtics made a bunch of threes again. Good for them. But honestly, what stands out to me, and I think what will continue to stand out to me in these matchups until something changes, is that the Knicks only took 24 threes, and I think 21 of those were in non-garbage time, in the 42 minutes of non-garbage time. That would be like a laughable three-point rate. That's untenable. It's almost impossible to win in today's league shooting that few threes. And I know, some people will shrug their shoulders or they'll scoff, and it's like, oh, basketball is about more than shooting. We agree, it's not all about shooting. But sometimes the answer is just you need more shooting, and you need to be able to create more threes. And so guys like Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, I don't see a path to them creating three pointers if they continue to be put in these positions where the opponent can just easily stop them from getting open threes. They either have to take a lot more difficult ones and their efficiency is going to go down, or they're just not going to take them. Those are their only two options right now, because it's almost impossible to create in the half court. It's almost impossible to create good or open or wide open three pointers, just the way things are. And that's what we saw tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point, and I think it's a fitting place to start. If you're playing against the Boston Celtics, you are not winning by shooting minimal threes. Like, you are not winning that game by not even coming close to the number that they are attempting. There definitely has to be a concerted effort to attempt more threes, and I think, from a macro perspective, this is such an important game to break down, just because obviously, for Knicks fans who are here, the whole an entire goal of this offseason and the acquisition of Mikal Bridges and the acquisition of OG Anunoby and everything that they're trying to do from the Knicks perspective is to defeat the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. And we have another juggernaut in the East in the Cleveland Cavaliers kind of coming sort of out of nowhere, maybe not when you really kind of think about it, but also, that hasn't been the focus. The focus has been the Boston Celtics. And with the focus being the Boston Celtics, you've now gotten destroyed and decimated by them for the 2 games that you played. Of course, OG Anunoby did not play in this game, which is a huge factor. Mitchell Robinson did not play in this game, which is something that I think that we also need to really talk about. But I think it's very fitting to start with the 3-point shooting disparity. The Celtics took 39 threes, hit 19 of them. The Knicks took 24 threes, hit 9 of them. That is not going to do it. And in fact, when you lose a game by 27 points, there's no way that the 3-point shooting disparity should be what it is, because at some point you were down a lot of points, and the only way to really come back from down a lot of points in a small amount of time is to shoot more threes. Like, even if it's forced, in my opinion, if you're the Knicks, I'd rather lose by 50 and had made an attempt by shooting many threes than lose by 27 and didn't and took a bunch of twos, like in situations, or played a couple of non-shooters, which is something else that we need to get to, in situations where you really needed to get up your 3-point attempts. In the meantime, I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody in the chat. The chat is very active right now. Tons of chat messages coming in. We're gonna definitely get to as many comments, questions, opinions as we possibly can. Again, this is our first time doing this, a live kind of post-game show, so we're really excited about it. And we just decided, maybe like in the third quarter, that we were gonna do it. So really excited to have as many people here and it be super active as we're seeing. We're definitely gonna be super engaged with all you guys after we kind of like start kind of laying out our general thesis about what we think happened. So yeah, any next things you want to talk about, Geoff, besides the 3-point rate?
I just want to add one more thing about the 3-point rate, because
Yeah.
there's a specific tactical approach or subject that I want to touch on. The Celtics didn't even have their most valuable player in terms of or their second most, either Tatum or Porzingis, in terms of creating the space that we've come to know from the Celtics in the last year and a half. They didn't have Porzingis and they didn't have Drew Holiday. This was a team that was similarly deploying 2 big men. So, like, if this was a mucky game where both teams were struggling to create threes, I would actually, from the Knicks' perspective, feel a little bit better about it, because it's just like, oh, both teams were kind of playing suboptimal lineup constructions, and it was really tough. But the Knicks weren't able to prevent the Celtics from getting their threes. They weren't attacking the Celtics bigs the same way that the Celtics bigs were attacking Precious Achiuwa and Josh Hart.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a really, really important moment in the game where the Knicks came out of halftime. They were down 12 or 13, and they started Deuce McBride in Precious Achiuwa's place. And the first, 6-8 minutes of the half looked really good for the Knicks. They cut it to 3 points. Deuce didn't even have a good game. He was 1 of 8 from the field, but you saw a huge difference in passive impact between Deuce McBride and Precious Achiuwa off the ball. Even with Deuce not making anything, the Celtics defenders wouldn't leave him alone.
Right.
But what did Joe Mazzulla do? In minutes, he had downloaded the Knicks adjustment and just said, okay, I'm going to, now Josh Hart's the guy. And there was no after counter. There was nothing. And then the game just flipped. And eventually the subs had to come in. And those were the only minutes of the game that the Knicks played with only 1 non-shooter of the entire game. They had 2 non-shooters for 40-plus minutes of a game against Boston. That's like, that can't happen just because OG Anunoby got hurt. That's just, we see it across the league. Guys get hurt all the time. And you can't just say, who is the closest thing that looks like OG Anunoby? Oh, this guy he's nothing like OG Anunoby. He's nothing like him at all. It's a lineup that sort of they got away with against the Rockets 2 games ago. And I would argue they didn't get away with it. They were down 7 or 9 with 7 minutes left, and then they put the small lineup into close, and the small lineup won them the game. And then I guess they got away with it against a bad Toronto team who cut it to 1 point against this big line. Like, it hadn't worked, and they just kept going back to it because Well, I couldn't tell you why, but eventually losing these marginal battles was always going to catch up to them. And of course, it happened against Boston. Boston, arguably the best team in the NBA, and Joe Mazzulla was just ready for it. I have to imagine that Mazzulla was maybe even caught a little bit off guard. Like, wait, they're really gonna try and do this? Like, they're really, and it was a bloodbath in the minutes. Precious Achiuwa, he's closer to unplayable
Yeah.
against Boston. Like it would be more justifiable for Precious Achiuwa to play 0 minutes. Landry Shamit is way more playable against Boston than Precious Achiuwa, specifically at power forward. Specifically at power forward when Josh Hart is on the court. If you want to tell me Precious Achiuwa can play 12 minutes a night, the 12 minutes a night that Josh Hart sits and Karl Anthony Towns is on the court for all 12 of those minutes, I'll buy that. He can play those minutes. But aside from that, he's just always going to get exposed. And I loved the ESPN broadcast tonight, by the way. Oh, Luke Cornett. Like, Luke Cornett's a good player. Definitely a good player. But they got like halfway there. They were like, oh, Luke Cornett is dominant, but they wouldn't talk about how he was able to be so dominant. It's like Mazzulla and Cornett were just looking around. It's like, oh, so I don't have to guard anybody. I can just stand here. It's just crazy. Like, I just don't get it. And the thing is, and we talk about this all the time on our show, it doesn't matter what team we're talking about. You can't just dismiss these decisions like, oh, well, they don't matter. OG Anunoby was hurt. Because it's not about the specific decisions themselves. It's the motivations that drive the decisions. That's everything here. It's what biases or what do you think matters the most in terms of winning a basketball game? How did that dictate and influence these decisions? And that should be extremely worrying to Knicks fans because it's very clear that when push comes to shove, shooting and spacing falls very low on the list of things that their coach think matters to winning the game.
Yeah, it's spot on. And first, I want to say shout out Drew P for dropping a super chat. Thank you so much for that. Drew P says happy to see y'all doing live content. We are not requesting super chats or anything like that, but if you guys want to do that's I mean, we definitely more than appreciate that. We are just here to kind of let out our frustrations and give our analysis and hear from all of you also. Again, we'll be definitely very interactive with the chat as we go along. But again, this is our first time kind of doing a live post-game show type dynamic. And I we are going to just be saying what we think. This is not pre-scripted. We are not thinking about stuff very deeply. I mean, we think about things deeply, and that's why we have our perspectives. But in terms of what comes out of our mouths during this post-game, it is our immediate reaction. So just recognize that. With that being said, Geoff, you talked about, there being only one non-shooter on the court for the majority of the game, for very little of the game. I'm looking at pivotfade.com, which gives breakdowns of each lineup's production in a single game. It's a really great website, a really great source. It has 11 minutes of the lineup: Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns, the lineup that I think you and I both believe should have started this game instead of the Precious version. 11 minutes, 11 seconds of that lineup. Geoff, do you know what the score was or what the ratings were, the net rating for those 11 minutes of that lineup playing?
I think when finally a sub was made, it was when Tatum got fouled shooting a free throw, and he made all 3 free throws to put him back up 13, which would mean the Knicks lost those minutes by 1.
Close. So it was a 0 net rating. So I'm not sure how they allocated the free throws, but it was a 0 net rating. So they played the Boston Celtics to a draw, 29-29, in the 11 minutes where that lineup played, and they lost the game by 27 points. I think everybody can do the math here. In that 35 minutes and 49 seconds, the Knicks lost those 35 minutes and 49 seconds by 27 points. That is horrendous to get blown out in that amount of time. And it is, and Deuce McBride, like you said, didn't even shoot well, didn't play particularly well, I thought. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of playing Deuce McBride. It's not for him to shoot well, and it's great if he does. Of course, if he shoots well, it's tremendous. It gives the Knicks a great advantage and opportunity to win a game against a team who I won't even say is better. What's a bigger loss, OG Anunoby or Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis? I'm not gonna say like who's better in that situation, not at full strength. But in my opinion, if Deuce doesn't make shots, you can still win this game because you have to respect Deuce McBride. You must respect his shooting, regardless of what you think, of anyone thinks about his shooting and how he shot tonight. He's shooting nearly 50% on wide open threes across the season. 50%. That is 1.5 points per shot attempt. That is insane. You cannot leave Deuce McBride open. And you think Joe Mazzulla doesn't know that? He absolutely knows that. And that's why the Knicks scored 126 points per 100 possessions when Deuce McBride was on the court with only one non-shooter in Josh Hart. And every other scenario, the second most played lineup, the starting lineup, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Miles McBride, Mikal Bridges, Precious Achiuwa, they were -8 in only 8 minutes, and the net rating is -53.4. That is garbage. Like, that's not, I mean, again, these are one games. We're cutting slivers out, but the point is that this is sort of consistent what we would hypothesize going into the game when you're playing against the Boston Celtics. You're playing against extremely smart defenders. I'm very high on Luke Kornet. I think Luke Kornet is really good and underrated. He played like an absolute monster today because his assignment was, I won't just say it's so easy, but like, because there is some strategizing, some strategic element to it where you need to know how much you can cheat off of the non-shooter. You have to make sure that you don't get beat on the boards while you're cheating off the non-shooter on back cuts, on cuts to the basket. And he does all that extremely well. He does it so well with Al Horford. Those two are the best two in the league at doing it. No surprise they play for Joe Mazzulla. You can't play this strategy against the Boston Celtics. I know what the rebound situation was, guys. I know what the rebound situation was, and we'll talk about the rebound situation. Regardless, you cannot win with that strategy against the Boston Celtics. It won't happen. It won't happen. And if they choose to deploy this strategy in the playoff situation, it is going to be a sweep. It is going to be a sweep. It really will. Like, this is not even something that changes on a dynamic of, oh, well, it's a small sample, a couple games. You could win on luck. You could win on no, you can't. You won't. It just doesn't work. So, in my opinion, Thibodeau, to his credit, pivoted away from it in the second half to start the second half, but then went right back to it. And it's very confusing to me. And I think, so many people have dropped in the chat some quotes from Tibbs after the game, and clearly he was really concerned about the rebounding. Jordan Bubb dropped it. John Leary dropped it. Tibbs after the loss. The rebounding was problematic to start. It was problematic throughout. I thought sometimes there were good initial sequences. Then they hurt us with the second shot. And his diagnosis of the game clearly was, we are losing not because we're not able to score consistently, not because they're taking advantage of us with this kind of defensive scheme, but it's because they're rebounding too much. That was his diagnosis of the game. And to me, that is problematic, because while the rebounding was a problem, there's something to that, of course. If we look at the shot attempts, which is what we're talking about, inevitably we're talking about the possession battle. That is why we care about rebounding. That is why we care about securing the ball and securing possessions. If we look at the possession battle, the shot attempts, the Knicks took 83 field goals attempts, and the Celtics took 85.
And the Knicks took 5 more free throws.
And the Knicks took 5 more free throws.
So they had like 1.5 more possessions technically.
Yes. And the rebounding battle was 48-30. So the Boston Celtics out rebounded the Knicks by 18 rebounds, yet effectively had a 1.5 possessions more than the Knicks.
And dude, if you're losing the rebounding battle already with the bigger lineup,
right?
That should make you realize we're not going to win it here. We have to win it elsewhere. That's what a good or a great coach does. A great coach doesn't say this is the only way we can win. If we can't win this way, if we can't win by not winning the rebounding battle, we're screwed. That's not what you do. You find another way. There are multiple ways to win basketball games. This isn't like a basketball game isn't a series of checklists, boxes you have to check, and rebounding is one of them. And if it were, by the way, XJ, if basketball in 2025 was a box checking competition, 3-point shooting would be way more important to winning basketball games than rebounding would be. It's not even close. I guarantee you teams win more often winning the 3-point battle and losing the rebounding battle than vice versa. I'm like so sure of this. And I just want to, because I'm so glad you brought up the playoffs. when you said, and when I said it and you followed it up, you said Deuce McBride, it doesn't even matter if his shots are going in. I want to clarify because and you can tell me if you disagree with this. I think Deuce McBride's shots not going in matter specifically relative to Precious Achua. And the reason that I bring this up is because, like I said, in the third quarter, when the Knicks were playing that single shooter, Missoula showed his hand. And that's that when Josh Hart is the only non shooter, he's going to go to Josh Hart's going to be the guy. He's going to put his center on Josh Hart, and that's where the help's going to come from. In a playoff series, that's going to be the answer. Assuming the Knicks are healthy and OG Anunoby is on the court and the Knicks have some of these great lineup potentials that are 4+1s, he's shown his hand. That's going to be the answer. And I think this is important because if Thibodeau thinks that Precious Achua versus Deuce McBride is this like, oh, well, one guy brings some positives and one guy brings the other positives, when it's like laughably clear which player is better, he obviously doesn't view Deuce McBride as versus Josh Hart as even close. Like he can't view them as even in the same ballpark or vicinity. And I just have to say that we said on our show from a few days ago that if you were going to build a championship team with a non-shooting wing on your team, Josh Hart would be one of the handful of guys you would choose. So I do think there is some truth to the idea that Hart and Precious aren't just the same because they're both non-shooters, and I do think that Deuce making shots and not just bringing that that passive impact, that spacing, and justifying that spacing, I do think that might make up the difference between Precious and Josh Hart. Because if they get into a playoff series and the Knicks offense can't create threes, can't get to the rim because they're essentially playing 4-on-5, there has to be a hard look at how do we create more space. That is the Knicks' path to beating this Boston team in a series.
I totally agree. I think the path is to how do we create more space. I agree with you. I think that I hear your point about Deuce McBride and making shots, especially relative to Precious Achua. I think that we have to expect Josh Hart's shooting to improve, and I think that's going to be really key. If he's going to play as many minutes as he does, his shooting will have to improve, especially in a playoff environment. He, before this game, was shooting 26% from three over the last 20 games, so very extended cold stretch from Josh Hart after coming out the gates red hot, was shooting nearly 40%, over 40% for a little bit, for the large majority of the season, maybe around 30 games, and then kind of just tanked his shooting. He needs to make shots as well, and that's an adjustment that just is going to have to come from Josh Hart. At the same time, in the meantime, you probably can't play Josh Hart with Precious Achua, right? Like, so if Josh Hart was playing how he was playing earlier in the season, maybe there's a little bit more realistic potential to playing Josh Hart with Precious Achua, potentially. Like, I think you can make a better argument for it, even though Hart was still taking about 3.5 threes per 75 possessions. At that rate, there's still some validity to the idea if he's making 40% of them. Not with him shooting 26% from three and Precious Achua, shooting air balls from the corner. That just doesn't work. It just doesn't. Shout out to Kevin Danishevsky for the super chat. Thank you so much, Kev. Thanks for being with us for our first kind of live post-game show here. Kev says, it's a sad commentary that I'm happy that he actually did the bare minimum there. Cut it to 3, and we don't have OG Mitch, but not acceptable to wait. Kevin, I think, is clearly talking about the fact that he inserted, I think he's talking about the fact that he inserted Deuce McBride for Precious Achua in the second half, I assume. And yeah, that was their best shot at this game. And the fact is that you're digging yourself into these deep holes early in games by trying to play Precious and Josh Hart, or Precious and Josh Hart and Ariel Hukporti in other games, and it's forcing you to kind of come back from a hole early in the game, and it's putting so much pressure on these other lineups to beat teams who are really good, and you can't just beat them by a few points. You have to destroy them in the few minutes that they're playing. That is undue pressure on these other lineups that they're running out there. I want to give a shout out to the people in the chat. The chat is super active. I love it right now. There's so many people in the chat right now talking a lot, giving a lot of great commentary and points. We got David Smith, Ian Shaw, Dwight C, Jordan Bubb, John Leary. Shout out John Leary's really active in there. Judah. Daniel, a bunch of people that I recognize from our other live stream that we did. King Imbert, really appreciate you guys all being here. Um, I want to talk about some of the things that people are saying in the chat. So there was the rebounding aspect that they were talking about, and I think that was really valid. What do you think about this situation with Karl Anthony Towns? Karl Anthony Towns was definitely getting hunted defensively. Like, this is the thing that they were doing. I couldn't really tell what coverage the Knicks were in, to be honest, because it looked kind of insane. Like, I could not tell if they were trying to switch, or they had Towns trying to hedge, or if he was in a drop. It was just like it was like weird. I could not tell, because then Tatum would come off the screen and then just do a simple in and out dribble, and he'd be at the rim, and that happened like multiple times throughout the game. What did you think about that coverage? What did you think about them hunting Karl Anthony Towns and Tibbs feeling like he needed to make an adjustment of going back to Precious Achiuwa? And I think that's why we saw a ton of Precious Achiuwa in the second half, when at some point I thought we wouldn't see Precious Achiuwa at all be inserted back into the game. And I thought that was a reaction to the Celtics seeming to hunt Karl Anthony Towns defensively. What did you think about Karl Anthony Towns, the defense? What approach do they have to go to when Karl Anthony Towns is in the game and the Celtics are clearly targeting him in the pick and roll?
Karl Anthony Towns is on the court to start the third quarter, right?
He was.
And to have a run like that, you need to outscore the other team, which requires the other team not to not score. Karl Anthony Towns isn't a great defender, so shit like that's going to happen. I don't think that the trade-offs are ever going to be... I don't think the answer with this team is ever going to be sacrificing offense to such an extreme extent to try to make it up on the defense. I don't... Especially if it's like Precious Achiuwa. Precious Achiuwa isn't going to come in and be this Band-Aid that stops the Celtics offense and makes up for the fact that you can't score anymore because he's on the court. That's nonsense. That's utter nonsense. I think that Towns...
Hang on, can I interject, because I know you asked you about Towns, but I just want to focus on that, because you said Precious Achiuwa. Basically, what you said, it sounded like to me, was you were suggesting that Precious's defense is not good enough to make up for how much you're losing offensively in terms of the spacing, in terms of the finishing, all of the things that he doesn't bring to the table offensively. Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to put a pin in that, because I think we need to come back to Mitchell Robinson, who is, I think, across the board in terms of social media response. The way that you deal with the issues that the Knicks have had tonight is when you have Mitchell Robinson instead of Precious Achiuwa, and that solves the problem. So I want to put a pin in that, but continue on Towns, and then we'll loop back to that.
We can loop back to that.
Or you can go with it now if you want.
No, I just think that with Mitch, it's going to be better. But I don't think that I'm going to say think here, because I definitely don't know, and very open to being wrong. But I don't think that what Mitch will do defensively to help Towns on the back end, I still don't think it's going to be enough. Even with what an elite offensive rebounder he is, even with how he can help hack the offense, the goal is to win 4 postseason series. A couple of them are going to be against teams like Boston and Cleveland and OKC or Dallas or maybe the Lakers, some of these really, really good teams. And I just don't think having Mitchell Robinson on the court for 25 to 30 minutes and reducing Karl Anthony Towns' offensive impact, that's going to lead to a lot of those, 100 to 110 point slugfest games. And, I'm not sure how much that correlates with a championship. Again, I don't know this for sure, and I think the Knicks should try it, to be clear. If the Knicks had Mitchell Robinson tonight and they had tried it, I would have been like, yeah, this is worth trying. I can see it. Mitchell Robinson has multiple seasons of huge individual impact. Trying to be creative and find a way to get him minutes on the court, that's at least a worthy pursuit. There is a ceiling there that I can imagine. Which makes that very different from Precious Achiuwa. Very different. And I'm not like Precious Achiuwa is fine. He's a fine bench player. Sometimes he gets hyped up too much by the Knicks fan base. Sometimes he gets hated on a little bit too much. But tonight, I don't even think it's his fault. He was put in a position where he was not going to succeed. He was not going to help the team. He was playing out of position. He was playing major minutes against a really smart team that cued in on him and was like, yeah, this guy is going to hurt them if we let him hurt them. And he hurt them. To bring it back to Towns, you brought up like what coverage he's playing. Yeah. I don't even think with Brunson it was clear. And this is the craziest part. I thought Brunson played a hell of a defensive game.
I thought so too.
I thought Brunson was awesome.
Yeah.
That was like one of the best games I've ever seen Brunson play because people need to realize this, and I feel like even Knicks fans don't fully embrace this because they just love the guy so much and they're just like, yeah, he's so good. They don't even want to think about it beyond that. They're just like, yeah, this guy's fucking awesome, and they should be. He is awesome, but this guy is operating in the corner of a phone booth more than anybody else in the league. Nobody else can have 23 points on 8 shots against the Boston Celtics with Precious Achiuwa and Josh Hart, with the defense having 2 free safeties in the game at all times. Their sole goal is to make sure that Jalen Brunson can't get good looks.
What a great analogy. 2 free it's literally like he's Tyreek Hill and they just have 2 free safeties just chilling waiting for him. He's like, nah, I'm gonna still make these catches anyway and I'm gonna cook in the middle of the field.
It's remarkable. And then he goes on the other end, and they are he's the guy. He like if whatever the inverse of a free safety is, like they're treating him on defense like they were treating Precious Achiuwa on offense. He's the guy they were hunting, trying to get switches on.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think this is the biggest props you can give Tibbs from this game. He didn't give up at all, even after multiple times of Tatum or Brown shooting over Jalen Brunson. He was like, dude, we're just switching. We're switching across these wings and guards. We're not doubling. We can't double. We can't send. That was probably the most encouraging thing they did all night was just say to Jalen Brunson, even against Al Horford, you gotta battle. That's what you gotta do. And he did, and I thought he played a great defensive game.
Did you feel like that was the scheme? Was just to like let Brunson battle these guys in an island?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
I thought it was intentional.
Gotcha.
Because like it couldn't have not a Tibbs on a Tibbs coach team, it couldn't happen for a whole game if it wasn't scheme based. He's just too hands on, too anal. If the first time Brunson didn't get help and they scored, you would have heard him, what the hell? You know, you would have heard him yelling, timeouts would have been called, and things would have been changed. Like that's how he operates.
Okay, no, I didn't think that they wanted to bring help. I mean, getting into the switches could have been not intentional. Once they were in the switches, I don't think he wanted to bring help.
They don't aggressively pre-switch. They don't aggressively scram.
Right. Right.
I mean, we talked about this a couple months ago on the show.
Right.
Like, yes, there are ways to get Brunson out of the action. They don't believe in that. They don't do that. I don't know why they don't believe in it.
I don't know why they don't do that.
Yes, pre-switching would be a good tactical improvement, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But the Towns thing is to me, it's just all about the trade-offs. And I think Knicks fans should be more worried about his health than anything. Because I thought that there were moments where he could have been more aggressive and he just was. It didn't seem like he was physically able to. But then you look at that stretch in the third quarter and all of a sudden Moses, the Red Sea parts and it's like all of a sudden he's able to get to the basket. He's line driving to the hoop again. He looks like his old self. So how much of it is Towns just getting the ball and seeing 4 defenders and being like, I'm not Jalen Brunson. I don't have the tweener, hezzy, jab step. Towns is a line driver. That's what he is. He actually, as responsible as he is for the team space, in order for him to be effective in terms of putting points on the board inside the arc, he needs space as much as anybody on the team, maybe.
Yeah, it's really interesting because he's the one creating the most space, but he also requires the space to do his thing, especially like in terms of he's a great straight line driver, but he has no opportunity to straight line drive to the rim because there's always a crowd down there. So that's a problem for him. And especially with his thumb issue or whatever's going on, he has just not been the same with his finishing. Towns is one of those guys who has the ultimate touch around the basket. He's like incredible at something, Geoff, I've noticed, where he's one of the few guys who barely has to have the ball in his hands and somehow is able to finish extremely well. Like it's like you could strip him and slap the ball out of his hands. As soon as he has his both hands touching it, if he puts it up, it's not one of those shots where it goes over the backboard and he didn't have a good grip on it. He finishes with touch with barely having the ball in his hands. He's so skilled around the basket, and he has not looked like that with this injury. And so you got to help the guy out with space. And to be honest, one of the main reasons why we talk about spacing so much is because spacing helps everyone play better. It just does. everyone is better in space. And there are trade-offs with having space because typically your best defenders, your tallest, biggest, strongest, longest, lankiest, most athletic defenders are not your best shooters. That is if they are, then you'll probably win a championship. But that's typically not the case, and so you do have to acknowledge there are going to be trade-offs there. But when you have space, it makes everyone better, and we know that from years of the NBA at this point in terms of the 3-point revolution. I do want to real quick, Geoff, before we continue, I do want to just kind of go through some of the chats that we've gotten so far. We've gotten really great comments. I just want to kind of like speed through and just see what some of the people are saying. A comment from Adabombo, Adajobi. Tibbs will watch this game and start Precious again next game.
He's going to. So yeah, that's true. It's definitely true.
It's definitely true. Yeah, that's why it's funny. GD Nation.
I think he thought that those first 8 to 10 minutes of the third quarter were like not successful.
Oh, you think so?
He didn't go back to the lineup the rest of the game.
You're right. That's a great point. Yeah,
that's insane. That's insane.
Played them to a draw in those minutes,
played the Celtics to a draw despite Deuce making no shots.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Played him to a draw despite, definitely some negative variance, and he didn't go back to the lineup. So, yeah, I mean, and you saw him go to Payne with the starters. Yeah. Maybe he likes Payne's physicality at the point of attack. Like, it's so silly to me. And
people were saying Wright wouldn't play very much. Wright's going to play, guys, because Wright can play defense, and he's a little better spacer than some of the other guys who played it. But go ahead.
And he's 6'5".
And he's 6'5". He's got that.
It's important.
Once you hit the 5, then you're golden.
It's just wild, and it seems dismissive, or I don't know, but it's just I'll never understand this pursuit of checking boxes at the expense of the net. That'll never make sense to me ever. I don't understand why coaches, analysts, fans analyze the game as though, or the way they discuss the game, or in a coach's case, the way they coach the game, as if there's a singular way to win a game. There's just not. It's never been the case, and it just doesn't make sense to me. It's so clear, especially in this case, who the Knicks' 5 best players are, and it's not a totally insane thing. It's not a totally insane fit. It would be one thing if it was 5 guards under 6'4", but they have plenty of everything, and the data backs this lineup up. And I'll say it again, the second best lineup in the entire NBA of all lineups that played 300 or more possessions last season was a smaller lineup. It was a smaller lineup.
It was smaller. You're right. You pointed that out too. You're like, wait, not only that, this lineup is literally smaller.
Yeah, it was a smaller lineup, and it's just this lineup has more space. I just don't really understand it. And
Geoff, let me try to speed through some super. I know I said one super chat, and we talked for 5 minutes after. Let me try to get. I mean, just whatever chats are in there. We can just have a quick comment.
This is why we're not. This is why we're not pros at this. Actually, we're not. We're not going pro. We're not going pro.
That's all right. I know we're good. I think we're doing solid. So let's go. GD Nation says the Knicks will never beat this team. I usually do not say this kind of thing. Basically, I think they can beat this team. I think that they have to make some significant changes in their approach, but I think they can beat them.
I don't even think it's that significant. I think they can just beat them if they don't play into Missoula's hands.
Exactly.
Just literally don't. You have a team that is just as talented as the Celtics team, and I'm sure that Celtics fans would take issue with that. As the defending champions, they were an amazing team last year. That's fine. I trust me. At the beginning of last season, XJ and I both came on here and said that the Celtics would be the greatest 5-man lineup in the history of the NBA. I don't think there are many people who are as aware how good this Celtics team is as we are. This Knicks team is extremely synergistic and has the tools to be great.
Geoff, can I get through I'm just going to read some chats.
We could just be on here. We could just be on here until 3 a.m.
Yeah, I know. It's like we'll be here for a while. No, I'm just trying to just read off what some people are saying, just so we could see, because we got a bunch of chats. Chat has been super active, so really appreciate that. Crim's dad says Cat must be injured. He hasn't played well lately. Yeah, I generally think that the injury is affecting him clearly. Like there's no way around it. Judah Benchar, hey Geoff and XJ, love that you're doing your first post game. Hope there are more and to come in more fortunate situations. What do you think, Geoff? We're gonna do some more.
I guess if you let me talk, you know.
Yeah, no,
No, keep
no,
keep going. Keep
we
going.
won't do anymore. Let's see. John Leary, Tibbs won't change. We saw the same thing last year with Precious McBride. We aren't big enough, the media tells us. When can the media ask post game about non-spacing lineups? Sorry for the rant.
Man, that's a great comment. That's an awesome comment because all right, I'm gonna need 30 seconds here. It's a great comment
Get
because
it?
first of all, he references last season, and we went through this. Like I feel like we've been gaslit as analysts here. Actually, we did this last year on Hot Hand Theory. Everyone told us that we were wrong, that Precious needed to play because OG was hurt. And then we already went through this. How did nobody learn anything? And then Deuce played again with an even smaller lineup. The lineup crushed, and now we're just back to square one. This is like, dude, do you watch Jeopardy, right?
Occasionally, not
There's
like a hardcore
there's
watcher.
this new show on Amazon Prime, Pop Culture Jeopardy. Nobody knows how to like hunt the board for daily doubles. Nobody knows how to bet. It's like they reset the game because it's a slightly new. It's not even new rules. It's just different questions, and nobody knows how to play Jeopardy. I don't understand. I'm watching. I'm going crazy. I'm like, what is happening here? Did you guys not have 30 years of Jeopardy to study? Like we're advanced this. We're past this. We already did the.
I like that analogy.
We already did the Precious and Power Forward thing last year. How are we starting over? Like we don't have this information. It doesn't make any sense.
That's incredible. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, and to that point, and John Leary's point, I think it was Alan Hahn, right, that had tweeted out the thing about like the Celtics players are doing a too small sign multiple times throughout the game,
Yeah.
which is an indicator of what the issue is here. It's like,
Alan's good too.
Alan's great. Yeah,
Alan's good too. I just think it's their nature to try to set it up so Tibbs has an out.
yeah,
And
I
obviously
agree.
we're not in the building. Maybe we'd have a different bias if we were in the building and our jobs required interacting with, you know, this guy. But I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying like I don't understand why that seems to be a prerequisite for that level of media is to just set it up so it's like, oh, see, it's not no, see, they need more size, they need more guys. It's like they don't actually need more. This team can win a championship.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Let's see. Shimmy MD says this is why we are not contenders. Our problem was defense and rebounding. Threes were secondary. Yeah, I think I generally disagree with that perspective. I understand why that can be taken away from this game, especially when you just look at the raw rebounding numbers. I think some of the rebounding stuff was affected by the like block shots actually. So the Knicks had a bunch of block shots which didn't allow them to get offensive or defensive rebounds. There were some factors that were going on, but really when you look at rebounding, you look at steals and turnovers, what you really want to understand is the possession battle, the fight over the number of possessions that you can get. And the point of that fight is to get more field goal attempts, because the more field goal attempts you get, the more you're able to miss and still have an opportunity to win the game. That's really what it's about. That's what rebounds are about. That's what turnovers are about. That's what the goal is. And the Knicks were totally fine in that possession battle. As we talked about, they played them to almost a near even in terms of the value that comes with field goal attempts when you include free throws. And they got blown out. So, you know, unless you're saying that the only way to beat the Celtics team is for the Knicks to out rebound them by like 15 or 20, that might be the case. But if you have the lineup that is going to be able to do that, then you're not going to have a lineup that's going to be able to score, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think about that, Geoff?
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you have a lineup that will out rebound them, you're going to lose in different areas. And we're going to come back here and say, oh, they lost because of this. That's it. Remember, guys, you're trying to give your team the best chance of winning. That's it. There's no guarantees to victory. And I'm sorry, but there just isn't a super strong correlation, especially in a matchup against the Celtics, who shoot a ton of threes that are volatile. There just isn't going to be a super strong correlation between rebounding and wins. That's not that I don't think there's any evidence of that at all.
Yep. Yep, just ask
Now I
Mark
just want
Dagnall.
to say there might be correlation between specifically offensive rebounding, which is why the Mitch thing might have some merit because if, as we talked about earlier, if you're not able to create the types of threes because you have two non-shooters and the Celtics are aggressive in helping off these two non-shooters, the best way to override that and to create threes would be off of offensive rebounds when there's a scramble. Mitchell Robinson can help you there. That would be at least a perspective that I'm open to. Still not sure I agree with it, but at least that is how rebounding and winning could correlate down the line in this matchup.
Yeah, I definitely know that 3 point, at least 3 point makes are the most highly correlated stat with winning games in the NBA across any like individual team stat. Um,
But
let's.
XJ, did you know that teams win 95% of the time when they run 20 or more times in the second half?
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't realize that. Shout out to who's the coach who said that?
Michael McCarthy,
There you go, Mike
20
McCarthy,
20-year veteran.
20-year veteran. Yeah,
20-year vet.
unquestionable. With
But
that
we we
tenure.
just have to appeal to his authority. He knows best.
Ian Shaw says, I'm happy to be here live and hope this continues in the future. Appreciate you being here, Ian. This will continue in the future. We'll have more post game shows, more live streams. Geoff and I just talked about like we really want to do this more frequently and just kind of engage with everybody. This is really fun. Vivek says, honest question, why did medical clear Cat to play tonight? Uh, it's a good question. I don't know. He was questionable before the game, wasn't he, Geoff?
Yeah, he was downgraded from probable to questionable. And what I found weird about it, and I think this probably is motivating Vivek's question, is that it was the knee. He was downgraded to questionable because of a totally different injury that I wasn't even aware of. Because I always thought it was his hand that was affected.
Yeah.
So if, and I mean, actually, you can probably comment on this a little better than I can, just because of some of the stuff you work on. But I think there's pretty strong correlation that if you are fighting through a certain injury, it increases the probability that you hurt something else because you're more likely to like favor other areas. Does that?
That definitely happens. I'm not sure that it's likely to happen with like a hand like
Yeah, that's
leg
true.
related thing. If it was like one knee, then the other knee for sure. But
Yeah,
like
that makes
hand
sense.
leg, I think it's probably less likely. Let's see what we got here. So many comments. This is awesome. Judah Benchar says, hate to be a doomer, but what do you guys think it would take for the Knicks to cut ties with Mr. Thomas? Who's Mr. Thomas? Am I oh
He
Thomas
means to.
Thibodeau.
He means to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's at the point I was at with Randall, which is I appreciate what he's done, but personally, and then it falls off. Oh, personally, don't believe he can take a championship team level team over the top. My feeling is it would take a bad series loss this playoffs and next playoffs, but who knows? Because Leon can be a cold business first capitalist when he wants, and especially now that the Knicks are all in, it's truly do or die. Unlike the first 4 years. Um, yeah, I'll definitely say like directly, I don't think Tibbs is the right coach to take the Knicks over the top to win a championship. I think Tibbs is a great floor raising coach. I think Tibbs is a great culture setting coach. I think he is a great defensive coach. I think he's great at establishing fundamentals and things that are really important towards winning a championship. I don't think he's the best in-game tactician. I don't think he's the best strategist when it comes to overarching macro strategy towards winning a championship and guiding a team throughout the entire season and then guiding a team through the playoffs and having tactical battles with some of the elite coaches in the league. And I think that some of his biases and some of the things that he believes are fundamental to winning are really grounded in some strategies and tactics from older time in the NBA. And I think that while he has adjusted to a very large extent and something that he should definitely get credit for being the age that he is, having 30 years of experience, kind of being able to move through different types of NBA up till now. I think he's still a little behind, and I think that that's going to make a difference in the margins, and in the margins is where you win championships. So for sure, I don't think that he's quite the right coach to get them over the top, but I also don't think that they're going to cut ties with him. I think that Leon kind of has a loyalty and allegiance to him, and I think that they're going to give him multiple years with this core to see if they can get it done. That's just where I'm at. What do you think, Jeff?
It's just wild. Like the Warriors had a worse history than the Knicks after the 2013-2014 season. They had made, I mean, they had won, I think, one playoff series since the 90s, and that was that surprise 8v1 matchup when they upset Dirk, when Dirk won 67 games and then lost as the 1 seed in 2007. And then Steph Curry finally gets past the ankle stuff. They come out of nowhere in 2012, 2013, upset Denver in round 1 as the 6th seed, push the Spurs to 6 games in a really impressive series. And then the next year, they're in the 5-4, or maybe the 6-3, one of the two, but against the Clippers, push that Clippers team to 7 games. Steph Curry fights like hell in Game 7 of 2014. I think the Warriors at that time were in a very similar spot to where the Knicks are potentially going to be in after the season. Definitely where the Knicks were in after last season. And that's that they had their culture entirely reset. They owed a lot to this coach who reset the culture, but they had to make a decision. It's not about raising the floor anymore. Was Mark Jackson maximizing this young core that fits so well together of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green? Was he maximizing them, or did he just get them to a certain point, and did they need a different guy to come in and raise the ceiling? And then they brought in Steve Kerr, and Steph Curry was 26 years old at the time, and immediately they win 67 games. The team goes from last in the NBA in passing to first. Last.
That's
can
crazy.
You imagine?
That's
can you
insane.
imagine? Think about we've watched this Warriors team for 10 years now. You can, if you're an NBA fan, you can close your eyes and you can picture the split action, Steph Curry relocating. You can picture all the Warriors stuff that has become so ingrained in watching NBA these days. And I want you to close your eyes and imagine that just not existing. Them just running a bunch of high screen and rolls with Jarrett Jack and posting up Harrison Barnes in the mid post.
That's
I want
incredible.
I want you to imagine them just doing that for the next 10 years because Mark Jackson turned the culture around and he knew how to coach defense. I think Tibbs is a better coach than Mark Jackson, by the way, but the similarities are very striking. Very striking.
I just want to say that's an incredible picture that you just painted. This is why for those of you who, I mean, obviously you know Geoff because you're here. Geoff is an elite analyst, an elite historical mind for the game, understanding of a tactical level, strategic level, game theory level. He has it all, but he can do that, what he just did, which is incredible. Because I just imagine that, and I'm like, what the fuck would we have been subjected to and not have had if that change didn't happen? And think about this Knicks team going from 25th or whatever in pace to, you know, top 5 in pace, going from one of the fewest three-point shooting teams, three-point attempt teams in the league to one of the top three-point attempt teams in the league. Like, this team could look entirely different, and we may never see that happen if there is not a change at some point over the next couple of years. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that's incredible to paint that picture.
Thank you. That's all I got to say is I appreciate you.
Hawkeye 420 appreciates us here. He says, this was earlier. He says, 40 of you in here, hit the like button for these two. Great content, great analysis, and great Knicks fans. For those who care about that stuff like that, hit that like and subscribe button, ring the notification bell. Shout out Hawkeye 420. Appreciate you dropping that in the chat. Yeah, if you haven't yet, hit the like button if you're enjoying this post game. If you want us to do more, we're definitely down to do more and do this more frequently. Do this for the Knicks, do this for other teams as well. And just kind of go live a lot more often. So let us know by, hitting the like button, subscribing, dropping a comment. Let us know that you're enjoying it and want us to do more of this, because we definitely are interested in doing that. Let's see what we got going down. So many CP's True Mets Talk, great post-game fella. Shout out CP's True Mets Talk. I have checked out the pod a few times. You do dope stuff over there, so appreciate the comment. Let's see. John Leary says, I missed last season. Dante, such a sniper. Yeah, dude. Dante would be pretty helpful on this squad right now.
It's so nuts to me how many guys the Knicks have had who have just almost Tibbs-proofed the roster. Like, DiVincenzo is just another one. Like, oh, sorry, you're not going to be able to create threes for Dante because you have these non-shooters that teams are just, you're not going to get. And DiVincenzo was just like, all right, well, what if I step like 6 feet beyond the arc and then I shoot 44% on those shots? And he did that. Like, the Knicks have had an answer for every single one of those problems. I brought it up on the show. Oh, sorry, your best player, we're going to be able to attack him in ways that apparently you don't anticipate because you have 2 non-shooters on the court and we're just always going to have a second guy waiting for him. Well, sorry, we have Jalen Brunson. Second guy waiting for him doesn't matter. He can score 23 points on 8 shots against that sort of defense, you know? Towns. Tibbs wants to play big guys. He wants guys who protect the rim or whatever. And Leon Rose goes and gets Towns, who is a center, who can technically is a center, who can shoot threes with the best of them. You know, the list just goes on and on. OG Anunoby. If you were gonna, Towns is a weak rim protector, but he's got to play center for the shooting. OG Anunoby is one of one in terms of weak side rim protection on the back line. You know, the list just goes on, and I'm sorry. This is why I'm not. If there's one thing I'm not empathetic to with regards to analysis, is that this team doesn't have enough. I think it's very clear to me that this team does have enough, and I feel like Knicks fans have been almost gaslit by the people who continue to say because they're not perfect, because that when lineup X plays, it doesn't check every single box. That means they need more, with the assumption being that if there was more, it would be deployed, which, why would we have any confidence in that, by the way? Why, after 5 years, what in 5 years have you seen that makes you think that if, like, Mikal Bridges would play less if there was a slightly better player coming off the bench? That's just already you're being gaslit if that is the analysis you're being given. It's bad analysis. It's just really bad analysis, but forget that. The team is good enough. It just absolutely is good enough, and yeah, I'm just not empathetic to the excuses of, well, they need more rim protection, they need more rebounding, they can't go small because OG's hurt. What are they supposed to do? They don't have another wing. Win a different way. This is an extremely versatile team. They have more than one way to win. They don't need just somebody, OG's out. They need someone who looks like OG. No, you just go to a smaller lineup like they were forced to do last year. They were literally forced to do it last year. They had nobody else. He said, fine, fuck it, I'll do it. And that team outscored opponents by 30 points per 100 possessions across a huge sample size. It's insane.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's like, all right, gosh, I guess I'll do it. Destruction, like annihilating teams.
And then learn nothing. And here we are. Learn nothing from it. Learn absolutely nothing from it. And we're back here 8 months later, and we have the same people saying, well, what's he supposed to do? Shit, man, I don't know. Do the thing that worked really well last year. Try it.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Hawkeye 420 had said, XJ, I've tweeted at you before about how Tibbs is coached like it's 2021 again during the Hawks midseason cup. It is tragic that it keeps showing up this season. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think it's a more outdated approach, and I think that it really has to change moving forward. Like, do I think it will? Probably not. Do I think there's possible? It's possible because Tibbs has shown an ability to adjust. It sort of just takes some extra time, it seems like. So maybe he just has to continue to see this and get it out of the system. We're probably going to then see the Knicks be without OG for at least a couple more weeks, right? As that was the reporting. So we are going to get to see if this is something that Tibbs eventually changes. Remember last year when they went with Precious, when OG was out. Eventually, once that got exposed, I think if it was the Sixers game or the Lakers game, one of those games where he got exposed, then he went away from it and went to the lineup that you just mentioned with Deuce McBride and the small lineup with a ton of spacing around Isaiah Hartenstein, and that lineup completely dominated its minutes. So, maybe we see him get it out of his system again and make that modification. I'm not sure.
But Deuce McBride, let's be a little bit fair. It's asking a lot of Tibbs to go from where he is now to just fully embracing the passive impact of a guy who's 1 of 8 from the field. Deuce McBride has to make shots when he's given these long opportunities. He had a couple really, really big shots. That picturing that corner three, he's wide open from the corner, just back rims it. I'm not gonna pass or fail a guy's 10 ability off of one corner three, but I'm just saying. I do think that in the short term, Deuce has to earn it when he's on the court in a better way than, my gravity's good,
Yeah, I generally disagree with this. So because I think I've heard you say this before, and I don't agree that he needs to sort of like it's difficult to like put it on the player, right? Like in my opinion, the player cannot necessarily need to earn his minutes by making shots, because then you're subject to like variance, you're subject to hot and cold streaks, so if your decision making is predicated on whether a guy makes shots in a small sample or not, that's just poor decision making, in my opinion. Like, I don't think you can choose who starts based on, oh, this guy went 1 of 8, so forget it, I can't go that in that direction. In my opinion, you go with what makes sense strategically, what's most effective, what the data shows, and all of that stuff lines up, whether or not he's making shots. And to me, that has to be on the coach, the coaching staff, and the decision makers, as opposed to the player who is doing their best to make shots. Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're on a cold streak, sometimes they're on a hot streak. Every player suffers from that, and I don't think that can be the foundation of the coach's decision making.
Of course, but I think that the poor strategy is baked in. That's what my point is. I think you have to
I see,
start.
I see, I
I'm
see.
saying that Tibbs is already under the assumption that Deuce's offensive value comes when he's making shots.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And so he doesn't. He's clearly put off by the size thing, and these are just biases that are baked in. So yes, of course, in an ideal world, the whims of short term shooting variance wouldn't dictate decision making. But my
Right,
point
right.
is that the Knicks are kind of at the mercy of this short term variance because if something radical is going to happen, like Deuce getting put in the starting lineup for Precious, which to be clear shouldn't be seen as radical at all, he's gotta
Yeah.
make shots. That's what Knicks fans are sort of at the mercy of right now.
Yeah, I understand better what you're saying. Yeah, I it's unfortunate because we've talked about this before. It's like it's hard for my analysis to be based on like, filtered through the eyes of the decision maker in this way. But
Yeah.
in that way, yeah, I think that that's true. Obviously, if Deuce goes 6 for 8 tonight, it's a lot more likely we see him start the next game, which is just like objectively true. Um, Ian Shaw says we have a contending roster, but evidence has shown we are behind the top tactical philosophies around the NBA. You need a diversity of ways to win. The quote unquote play better adjustment is not as valuable as the core strategy. Yeah, I think that's an incredible comment.
Man, I
I don't
feel
even
like
know if I
that's
have
my
anything to
my
add to that.
yeah. I feel like that's my burner account. Did I comment that? Am I
I,
Ian Shaw?
I was trying to see if like changing the letters of his name around ended up being your name in some way, but no, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Let's see what else do we got here. These are great comments too. Let's see. Unlimited Unboxed says great show, guys. Thank you so much. I see a ton of comments from you too as well. What's up?
You go. These are great comments. These are just awesome comments. And then the next one you read is like, "You guys are awesome."
That's a sick comment. I don't know what
Yeah,
to
it is
say.
a
Like
sick
that's an
comment,
awesome
dude.
comment.
Yeah, you guys kick ass. Sick comment, man. Yeah, these are objectively good comments.
Yeah, you guys are crushing these comments. I'm just
Yeah.
no. I'm trying to look for a comment that's like
I,
disagreeing with
I
us
will
or
I will
having.
say I will say though, actually, while
Yeah,
you're looking for a comment,
sure.
I'm gonna bring it up like in every episode because I've noticed more and more on our shows as the word is getting out that we literally engage with all comments. Like our one baseline here at High End Theory is just be respectful. We don't
Yeah.
want you to agree with us. We're there like we talk about a phenomenon called audience capture all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been so cultivated into people. There are people who go to these shows, and it's not just a Knicks thing, it's not just a sports thing, it's any of these things. They want to feel this camaraderie with the people hosting. And so oftentimes you'll see people say what they know the host's perspective is. They'll
Yeah.
just kind of parrot it
Mm-hmm.
because they want to feel that camaraderie. They want to feel heard. And that's not what we're looking for at all. And I'm not saying we're not looking for camaraderie. We love the people who talk to us and say they love our show. That feels great for us. But I'm saying we're not looking for people to agree with us. We're actually looking for people to actively disagree with us because we know we're not right all the time. We want to hear a variety of perspectives. And I think what I've noticed more and more lately is that people are realizing that we're not just only engaging with the people who agree with us. We're actually maybe more actively engaging with the people who disagree with us. The only baseline is just respectful dissent. Have an open mind. Come into it with like, hey, this is my perspective. Here's what's backing it. Here's the intuition. Here's the data. And that's awesome. And we're seeing it more and more. And I just love that rather than cultivating an environment of people who are just like, oh, we know that XJ and Geoff feel this way, so we're going to feel this way or we're going to purport this opinion. They just say like what they're feeling, whether they agree or disagree. And I think that's awesome. I think it's good for our community.
Yeah, I think that's extremely well said. Well heard by me in the chat, hopefully. But yeah, I I totally agree with that. I think I love when people are just saying what they actually think. If they are compelled by what we say and they say that, that's awesome. If they're not necessarily swayed by what we're saying and they have a different perspective, share that perspective. And in that kind, Drew P says, I push back on the defensive rebounding point. Watching those rebounds today, they were not about 3 point rebounding volatility. They were grabbing boards over smaller players. What do you think about that when it comes to like the rebounding disparity and sort of size being a factor there?
So I would just ask Drew to consider that and not getting a defensive rebound or the opponent getting an offensive rebound, for the most part, they are created equal. Like they're not extra harmful because, well, if a bigger guy was in that spot, they could have gotten that rebound. They're all, you're giving up an offensive rebound, the opposing team is getting an extra possession. That's what not getting the defensive rebound is worth. If you totally overhaul your strategy because in the short term you're giving up more offensive rebounds than you'd like and you do it at the expense of space on the other end, at the expense of your offense, it's extremely likely, and I'm not saying this in a vacuum, I'm specifically applying it to this Knicks team with this roster with OG Anunoby out,
Mm-hmm.
the decisions that they'd have to make, it's extremely likely that you're going to be losing on the net. And to us, I'm not saying this is definitely right, but to us, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have too much to add on that. I think that's exactly right. Yep. But definitely appreciate the comment. I do think it's like I don't think it's like a thing to blow over. I think rebounding is a major part of winning games. We obviously know it's like one of the four factors of the big four factors, as they say, which is shooting and shooting percentage, turnovers, rebounding, and free throws. And it's a critical performance indicator as it relates to winning games. And so I don't want it to feel like we're blowing over that, but there are just trade-offs that have to happen. And it depends on what your team construction is. Some teams may need to prioritize rebounding because of the way that they're constructed. Maybe they have a lockdown defense and just minimizing the possessions that the opponent has is enough to win games. The Knicks don't have that. The Knicks have what should be a high octane, high scoring offense. And the way that they're going to win games is by outscoring opponents, including the Boston Celtics, in my opinion. So I think if that's the case, we have to understand that there's going to be some trade-offs, and the trade-off is going to be rebounding at some point. If it could be, it actually also could not be, to be clear, because I think in some cases we think that more size equals more rebounding, and that is not always necessarily the case. Geoff, you've talked about this a bunch this season, about how 3 point shots equate into long rebounds, and oftentimes it's the guards and the small wings getting those longer rebounds. So there are some situations where size doesn't necessarily always equal more rebounds. There's transition opportunities to consider. I think it's a little bit more of a complex analysis than that. But all things equal, I would say obviously you have a bigger team, you have more likely to get more rebounds. But it's just too much of a trade off that comes with that, in my opinion. Um, so yeah.
Did you notice there was a point in tonight's game, XJ? It was after the third quarter, so it was after the Deuce lineup had already had its go, and Tibbs decided that the Knicks needed more size. There was a moment where the Knicks were the smaller team, but they were going big, and they were still the smaller team, and they had less shooting than the Celtics on the court. So they were winning none of the battles. It was crazy. It was like they were playing. It was the Celtics had Tatum and Pritchard and Hauser and Horford and Luke Cornett. So the Celtics were playing like a true 4+1 with two monsters and then a big wing and Tatum. And then the Knicks had Precious and Towns and Hart. And it was just like I didn't understand how they thought they were going to win in those minutes. They were gaining nothing on the Celtics in that. I just didn't understand it.
Yeah, that's that's a great point. That's crazy. I want to say that somebody mentioned, let's see where that comment was. Oh, it was Hawkeye 420. Not sure what software y'all use, but can you show the comment on the screen? I think we can. I
Wow,
didn't. So
okay.
honestly, I appreciate y'all. Like again, this is one of our first times doing this, and I'm like, yeah, of course I want to show the comment on the screen that I'm reading, but then I'm like, I don't know how to do it because we use a software called Riverside. Most podcasters, I think, use something called StreamYard. I know in working at Knicks Film School, they use StreamYard, and it's a little bit more user friendly and intuitive, but this is really helpful. I've learned that I can do that, so that's a really helpful comment. I appreciate that. Let's see. Someone named Jay Terrence Ridge. Appreciate you dropping a comment in here. Says Towns is better than Randall, but this year team can't defend wings, and our bench this year is very weak. Um, I think that's definitely true that the bench is weak relative to last year for sure. I'm not sure that the Randall Towns trade off is more or less effective in terms of defending wings. I haven't really thought about it in that context. What do you think?
Like the team would be better at defending wings if they had Randall and a center,
Um,
or the
yeah, if
team would be.
that's true because Towns is primarily playing a center. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to interpret it.
I would just
Jay Terrence,
rather.
if you have more to add, just drop that in the comment. But yeah, I appreciate it.
My perspective is that I would just rather have OG or Bridges on the wings than Randall on them, or Randall and OG.
Yeah,
So I assume that the Knicks got better at defending wings. I'm open to being wrong, but I assume that with Bridges and how good he's been at everything on defense this year that doesn't involve screen navigation, especially in the last half of games or so, I would assume that Bridges and OG and Hart becoming the third best wing defender in the starting lineup. I think they'd get better at guarding guards and wings if Deuce was in the starting lineup, but that's a different conversation. Um, but yeah, and then not to mention, I do think they got better at guarding wings. But then, if you're saying that they'd be better at guarding wings with Randall and a center, because Randall is secretly good at guarding wings, which he definitely showed flashes. Let's just say hypothetically that is the case. They gotta be giving it back on the other end. So you're still losing on the net. Um,
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I think that's on point. HRMX Great has dropped a bunch of comments, which really appreciate that. All the comments in the chat. I love when the chat is going. Says the roster is catered to him being Tibbs, and still can't get it right. Can you speak a little bit about like, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, but I know this is something you've talked about, like how catered this roster is kind of perfectly to Tibbs's kind of desires of what he wants to do. Um, can you talk a little bit about that more, just because I know that's something you've been kind of harping on for a little while now, which I think is such a great observation that I didn't even recognize.
yeah, especially with how far they've come,
Yeah,
and maybe I'm a little biased here by remembering conversations that we've had in the past. Whether it's um, I don't think Elfrid Payton should be the starting point guard. We have a bunch of data that shows that Elfrid Payton shouldn't be the starting point guard, and people would say, well, Tibbs likes a Tibbs likes his primary guard at the point of attack to be bigger and stronger, and he wants his point guard to be able to get to the rim or to be able to score inside the arc. And then the next year, he had Burke starting at point guard in the last season over Emmanuel Quickley, and there were things that Emmanuel Quickley didn't bring as a lead guard that disallowed him from being in the starting lineup. And then the next year in the playoffs, he had RJ and Josh Hart playing together on the wings when Quentin Grimes was a much more suitable candidate in some of these playoff matchups against the Heat. And people said, well, Tibbs has certain biases that are always going to favor RJ and Hart, namely size and rebounding, stuff like that. So, okay, so he couldn't play Grimes there. And then the 2024, you had the Precious versus Deuce thing. And this is why Precious needs to play. He has size. You think about the biases that motivate Tibbs' decision making. You think about the things he likes, the things he wants. They check every single one of these boxes. And then you think about some of his objective weaknesses, whether it's overtaxing guys who he really likes, starters, whether it's maybe not caring about shooting and spacing as much as he should, as we saw tonight. And you just look at the roster that he has, and it's just perfectly built to offset these weaknesses. You have Bridges and Hart, who are two of, if not the two most durable wings in the entire NBA. So it almost doesn't matter if Tibbs is going to overplay them because they can just handle any amount of minutes. They're aliens. They're absolute maniacs. The way these two can play, it's absolutely insane. You talk about the lack of spacing. As I said earlier on this show, Jalen Brunson is arguably one of one in the entire NBA at scoring in a shoebox or in a phone booth. He is just a master at it. And so, just imagine a conversation where the front office was like, "Hey, like maybe we should make it easier on our lead guards and we should prioritize space more." And Tibbs was like, "Yeah, well, I can't just focus on space. I need other things more. I need rebounding and I need size. And if they can't shoot, they can't shoot. I'll figure it out." Well, the front office went and figured it out. They got Jalen Brunson. That's how they figured it out. Is they have this guy who space doesn't really matter for. He's going to be efficient regardless. And then another way to help with the space is to get a center in Karl Anthony Towns, who's the best spacing big man in the entire NBA. So, and then the last thing that I always say is that if you're going to have Towns, who is the best big man spacer in the entire NBA, and his weakness is rim protection, you could not, in a lab, build a more perfect power forward than OG Anunoby to play next to him. They are perfectly correlatory. They just can both be 100% of themselves playing next to each other. And they can do it doing the things that Tibbs has said he values on a winning basketball team. So, this is the second time I've gotten this rant today, but HRMX the Great brings it up. It is perfectly catered to him. I have zero empathy for the idea that this team needs more. This is not only in a vacuum with any coach, a perfectly constructed starting top 6 players, including Deuce McBride, but it is also perfectly catered to his strengths and weaknesses. So this should be, there should be expectations and there should be ramifications. The answer at the end of the season can't be, oh, well, they got hurt, or well, what's he supposed to do? He needs more. That's nonsense.
Yeah, I actually selfishly, I just wanted you to do the rant again, so that's why I brought that comment up. But yeah, no, I think that's all right, and that's why I wanted you to mention it. Let's see, Drew P, speaking of the roster, brings up another point. Says, XJ, you were going to circle back earlier about the Mitch conversation. I think lineup wise, I know you prefer Deuce, but if Tibbs won't start him, would you rather see Mitch start instead of Josh? And I think this is a great question because I think this harkens back to something we talked about in the most recent pod, which is how many lineups are being played that include Josh Hart. And so I would say I would prefer Mitch start instead of Josh. I think you don't actually lose that much. And in my opinion, if you wanted to find a balance, try to find the best of all worlds, a middle ground that would be most likely to help the Knicks kind of accomplish the rim protection that they're looking for, the rebounding that they're looking for, and take advantage of the maximal spacing that they're hoping to, it would be starting Mitchell Robinson for Josh Hart. That would be the approach. Now, I don't think it'll happen. I don't see it happening. I think that the starting lineup will not change because all the 5 guys in the starting lineup, I don't think any of them can go to the bench when it comes to like Tibbs. I don't think Tibbs is sending Mikal Bridges to the bench, and the Knicks probably would step in to block it if he tried to. I don't think Tibbs can send OG Anunoby to the bench. Obviously, OG Anunoby is the player that makes the entire thing work, as you described, a power forward next to Karl Anthony Towns who can help protect the rim, who's their best off-ball defender, who is one of their best on-ball defenders against wings, who there's no chance, also a very strong corner three-point shooter. There's no chance he goes to the bench. Josh Hart is the one that makes the most sense, but Josh Hart plays in the Knicks, I think it was the Knicks' 6 top most played lineups next to Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. When Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns are on the court, Josh Hart is on the court in the top 6 lineups with those 2 players on the court. I can't imagine it going from that to him just not starting. So if they were to do that, I actually would not have much of an issue. I would say, Josh Hart's shooting 26% over the last 20 games. He's your weakest shooter in the starting lineup currently. You sub out your weakest shooter for an even weaker shooter, but one who brings other strengths and advantages. Josh Hart's a great rebounder for a 6'4" guard or wing. Mitchell Robinson's a great rebounder in terms of all time in the game of basketball. Like that's a major upgrade in terms of rebounding, a major upgrade in terms of rim protection. And so I would not have an issue with that. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
I agree with you. I agree with you about the merit of it. I disagree with you though that it not happening. I think there's again, I don't know. I don't have any inside information about Mitch's health or what he's gonna look like when he comes back. But just for the sake of this conversation, assuming Mitch comes back as Mitch and he's capable of playing 20 to 25 solid minutes of a game at the impact level that we've seen throughout his career when he's been healthy, I think that you could convince Tibbs that he talks about Josh Hart's impact on rebounding. You could convince him that Mitchell Robinson would have an even greater impact on rebounding. He loves rim protection. You could talk about Towns, doesn't really protect the rim, and OG's doing his best, but obviously Mitchell Robinson would help there. And selfishly, I think that you could still play Hart 30 to 35 minutes a game without you're not really sacrificing minutes that he plays. So I think that Tibbs could see that and be like, this is the best way to get Mitch out there and start the stagger of him and Towns while maintaining Hart's, while keeping his minutes floor relatively high. And so I think it would help the wing rotation. I think there's a chance that if Mitch is able to do it, it happens. Because the alternative, by the way, is, I mean, what the alternative is, XJ. The alternative is that they keep this 5-man starting lineup and Mitch and Precious come off the bench together. That's gonna fail. That will fail.
Well, I mean, yeah, and obviously, like especially in a playoff environment, but I can imagine. Here's what I think is gonna happen. I obviously agree with you. Like it's very merited, exactly what you said, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Here's what I think is gonna happen. I think it's gonna be the starting lineup as we know it, and the first guy to the bench is gonna be OG Anunoby, and the first guy off the bench is gonna be Mitchell Robinson, and we are gonna see a ton of Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Mitchell Robinson, and Karl Anthony Towns. And then when Josh Hart goes to the bench, maybe OG comes back. And then maybe when Towns goes to the bench, then it's Precious. I do think we'll probably see Precious Mitch lineups, like, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes a game or something like that. That's what I think is going to happen. Obviously, from a Knicks fan perspective, you're gonna have to hope that I'm wrong about that, but that's honestly what I think will happen. Well, we'll see. Let's see. I think we can probably wind it down now. I mean, I think we've been on for going on 90 minutes here, and I think we kind of got out most of the things that we wanted to talk about. I think that we've gotten tons of great comments that we've been talking through, and you all have been really awesome and supportive for our first foray into doing a live post game show. And again, we're going to definitely try to do this more, both post games and just general live shows. And we have a lot more cool stuff for you all. Some cool guests coming up actually over the next couple of weeks that I think people will be excited for. Awesome pods that we're going to be doing about the Knicks and other teams. So if you are a Knicks fan and you appreciate our style of analysis, we talk about other teams just as deeply. We are huge NBA watchers here. Jeff watches more NBA than I think anybody I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm not exaggerating at all. So we are deep divers into the data, into the film, into the watching, as you all know, and we cover other teams with the same amount of rigor. And it'll hopefully you guys appreciate the style that we come with, which is relatively unique in a space. And so if you want to check out another team episode, please do that as well. Jeff, before we get out of here, any other comments, thoughts?
Yeah. All of you, if you enjoyed our show, should click the subscribe button. But specifically, if just one of you could, you would make me extremely happy because I am OCD as hell, and we have exactly 1,999 subscribers, and that's gonna like eat at me. So if just one of you, just wants to click that button and make me happy, that would appreciate. No, I mean, we appreciate everyone regardless. So thanks to everyone who stuck it out for us. Apologies if some of our rants or analyses seemed, I don't want to say closed-minded because I mean we I hope it's clear by now to anyone who's listened to us that even if we come off dogmatic or overly expressive, that we do have an open mind with everything we talk about. Um, but yeah, I know. I know that sometimes people who are just overly analytics based or overly harp on one thing, like we do with spacing, it can sometimes just be like, all right, like enough. Let's talk about something else. But tonight's Knicks Celtics game was two coaches, one of whom properly understands the value of spacing and the other one who doesn't. And every single decision that you saw in the games tonight was driven by that juxtaposition of or diversion in tactics. That more than anything is what drove what you saw on the court tonight. On both ends of the floor, the Celtics offense was trying to create threes and create through space so that they could either get to the rim or shoot threes. And defensively, they exploited and helped off of and pre-rotated and just sometimes flat out ignored certain players with the sole goal of stopping the Knicks from getting those same shots. That dictated everything the Celtics were doing tonight. And on the other end, it was just try harder and rebounding and size, and there was very little effort or care put into that side, the part of the game. And the truth of the matter is that was the difference. It's not a skill gap between the two teams. It is a tactics gap. And if the Knicks are going to beat the Celtics in a playoff series, they need to improve tactically.
That is perfectly said. Well heard by me and our audience, I'm sure. Thank you all for joining again. Yeah, and we'll see you next time. We'll definitely see you on a pod this coming week, and then we'll also see you for live streams as we pop up. We don't have a schedule right now, but we'll probably get one together. Until then, it'll just be kind of ad hoc based on the night. But thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time. Sweet, dude.
Hell yeah.